friends, happy Sunday. Today we are talking about prophecies. And you might be thinking, what is a prophecy? And that's actually a really good question. There are a couple of different ways to define prophecy, and how you understand what a prophecy is really changes what you think about how they work and how they affect us in our world. To break it down, there are basically two kinds of prophecy, or two things that the word prophecy could mean. The first one is a prediction or a statement about the future. You might have heard of something like fortune telling, or people looking into a crystal ball trying to tell the future. A prophecy might sound like, you will find $5 on the sidewalk tomorrow, or you will have a very good week next week. Those are kind of what people think about when they think about prophecies. The thing about prophecies in the Bible, though, is they're not usually that specific. They don't say, you will find $5 on the sidewalk tomorrow. They don't usually say exactly what's going to happen or exactly when it's going to happen. It's more like information about the future, what things are going to be like, what's going to change. They don't always apply to individual people. They might be about groups of people or communities. They might be about big changes, big stories that God is telling. We can think about prophecies in the Bible like a promise that God makes. God says, this is the way I'm working things out. This is the story that I'm telling. This is how things are going to unfold. And it might be confusing or symbolic or hard to understand. In fact, there are lots of stories in and out of the Bible of people trying to figure out what a prophecy means or whether it's really coming true. The Bible gives us a lot of room to be part of the big story that God is telling, while also reminding us that when God does make us a promise, when God says, I will love you forever, or I will make sure that justice conquers over injustice, that God will keep those promises. We might not fully understand the specifics of how or when, but we can trust God that when God makes us a promise, when God says, I will always love you, I will always be there for you, and there will always be a part for you to play in this big story that I'm telling, that will be true. The other type of prophecy doesn't have anything to do with the future. It's not about predicting what's going to happen. This type of prophecy is sort of a way to talk about God in a really special way. In the Bible, there are people called prophets. A prophet is a person who says prophecies or prophetic things. And those things are truths that come from God. The person isn't speaking directly for God like a little puppet. The person is saying things that God has told them or shown them are true. Some prophets are really mad about things that God is mad about. Some prophets are really happy about the things that make God happy. Some prophets are really worried or confused about the things that God finds worrying or confusing or wants us to be confused about. A prophecy is a true thing that comes from God. It's somebody trying to share that with the world. Now, the prophets in the Bible were a specific group of people, and you probably don't count yourself among them, right? Because you're not a super old guy from the Bible, and probably most of us have never been called a prophet. But if a prophecy is something true and important from God, well, that's something that all of us can have. All of us can know things that are true. All of us can know what is important. And all of us can share that with the rest of the world. A prophecy is something true and important to God that's being shared by a person. And all of us can be those people. We can think, we can pray, we can study, we can work to understand what's important to God, what's true, what do we know? And we can share that. Some of us shared important truths about God as part of the pageant. Some of us share those truths by asking questions. Some of us like to write stories or draw pictures or just love other people. That's a prophetic thing to do. Love is really important to God. And when you show love to other people, you're showing what's important to God. So what does this mean for you? 1, We know that there are prophecies in the Bible about what's going to happen in the future, and a lot of those focus on how much God cares about us. God promises that now and in the future, God will care about us. God will be there for us. That no matter what happens, there's always going to be a story that God is telling, and the ending of that story is always going to be good. So you can be part of those prophecies today. You can live as part of this wonderful story that God is telling. And you can trust that when God makes us a promise, God will keep it. Second, in addition to hearing and receiving prophecies about God's love for you, you can share prophecies with the world. You can be like a prophet. You can say, this is important. This is true. Prophecies are confusing and complicated. Sometimes people make predictions about the future and they don't come true. And sometimes people say, God is telling me to say this. God thinks this is true. And other people say, I don't know about that. I think that's coming from you and not God. Prophecies are confusing and they're complicated, and we're not going to get to the bottom of them in a short video. What's important to know is that there are prophecies in the Bible about God's love for you, and those are true and important, and they will never be wrong. And second, all of us can try to be the best prophets we can be. We can be prayerful and thoughtful. We can learn from each other and from ourselves and from God. We can pray, we can read, and we can decide what is important for us to do and to say in the world.